All right. So this is interesting to see why this is happening. And what this shows is that the reason we're getting these big floods is because, in part, is that the heaviest rainfalls we get are getting heavier. Okay? They're getting heavier. So if you look here what this says, it says the percentage increase in the amount falling in very heavy precipitation events. So if you took the top 1% of the heaviest rainfalls we got, as they measured them from 1958 to 2007, that amount of rain that fell in that top 1% increased by 31% in the Midwest, even more so in the Northeast. So the heavy rains are getting heavier for whatever reason. They're getting heavier. And when they come down the river, they cause these flood pulses to occur. All right. The other thing that's happening here is, the way we use water. Ditching, agricultural ditching, is one of these. Northern Indiana is full of agricultural ditches. And so they're part of our concern. Everybody wants to get rid of water, and yet they want to keep water. So this is a tricky balancing act as to what these ditches actually do. So in this case here, what we're looking at is a new design for a ditch. It's called a two-stage ditch. Okay, a normal ditch looks something like this. Okay, here's the water in the bottom of it. It has steep banks, about 3 meters wide in this case, and when it fills up and collapses, a track hoe comes along and dips it out, right? Or a backhoe, they dip it out, clean it out again. This new design, which is being demonstrated around, takes this same ditch, but it cuts these shoulders into it right here, creating a miniature floodplain. And it pulls back these slopes so they're not quite so steep, because the steepness makes them want to collapse. But it pulls back to make a miniature floodplain. So when these flood, they can actually hold some water. So here's an example of one. This is Northern Indiana ditch, typical ditch, right? You can't see this, but the bank is collapsing in places, and sooner or later they'll dip this out. So this time a track hoe comes along, instead of dipping it out, he makes the floodplain. You can see the floodplain being created right in here. So he's creating this little floodplain. When it's finished, it looks like that. Okay, a very different looking ditch. When it works, it looks like that. That's a lot of storage capacity in that ditch. That ditch is storing a lot of water, and it's slowing that water down. Okay? Greater capacity means slower flow. Okay? So it's slowing that water down, and when it goes back down, it looks like that. Okay? That's it, when it goes back down. This is very expensive to do, but it's probably cheaper in the long run, because these ditches last so much longer, they don't have to be maintained. So if people can afford to do it up front, it pays them back down the road. We're actually working on one of these right now in Gibson County. We're hoping to have one in place along State Road 64. County surveyors working with us sometime in the next year or so. There will be one along State Road 64. Okay. Nitrogen yields is an issue. You know about Gulf dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, it's caused by nitrogen coming off the landscape, coming down into the Gulf. This shows you where the density of nitrogen is coming from. It fairly well lines up with the Corn Belt, but it's coming from everywhere. It's coming from wastewater treatment plants, it's coming from people's lawns, it's coming from everywhere is where this nitrogen is coming from. But it's coming primarily from us. Indiana is exporting a lot of this down to the Gulf of Mexico. Here's the proportional share. You can see again the Corn Belt sends out a lot of nitrogen. Not so much phosphorus, but still a lot of phosphorus going out and down the river. What's interesting here to me is that when you rank these, you look at percentages of what's going into the Gulf of Mexico, Illinois has this really high percentage of 16.8% of the nitrogen. And Indiana's third, but Indiana actually is producing more nitrogen per unit area. It produces more kilograms per square kilometer, or more pounds per acre, than do these other two states. On phosphorus, Indiana's way down here, but the story's the same. Indiana produces more phosphorus, exports it to the river, than these other states do. So I'm not sure what's going on here. I don't have an explanation for this, really, other than to say that estimates show, or measurements show, that Indiana produces a lot. Now, I'm almost to wrap this up here on the river. But I wanted to show you this. Phosphorus is expensive. I don't know what it costs, Rich, but it can't be cheap. put on the fields. It's pricey. You don't want to waste it because it costs a lot. I want to look at where is the Phosphate Act? Where does it exist at? Where does it come from? And where are we going to get it in the future? Okay? I want to show you here, you can see this, the list of countries where rock phosphate is. Okay? Algeria, China, Jordan, Morocco has almost all of it, Russia, South Africa, Syria, and the United States, and then there are other countries. That's not a list of our friends. That's not a list of our friends. So if they ever got together and figured this out, we could be in trouble because they control the phosphate deposits on the planet. This is where they're at. And so there is some concern here, and it's been talked about as far back as the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration that phosphorus could be a national security issue, or lack thereof. Here's why. Right there. Here's why. So, it's something we need to think about. So, other things to think about is that, phosphorus and nitrogen represent a problem to rivers, all of our rivers and streams. Losing it is a substantial economic loss, and it's a possible long-term security risk to us. Stormwater runoff and agricultural drainage, we need to be thinking about them in a whole new way, about how those things are managed. I didn't mention this, but I want you to think about this for a minute, in that Indiana is losing reservoir capacity. All of our big reservoirs in Indiana are filling up. They're filling up with sediment. It's a natural thing that's happening. Sediment naturally flows off the landscape, but it's filling into our reservoirs. Our reservoirs are large, but they are slowly filling. As they fill, we lose water storage capacity, which can exacerbate floods, but it also says that we're not going to have as much water to draw on in the future. I had a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers in Louisville, and I brought this up, and I said, well, what is the plan, what is the Corps' long-term plan for managing these reservoirs for their capacity? And the planner, the chief of planning at the Corps said, we don't have a plan. There is no plan for managing those reservoirs and correcting them to replace their capacity in the future. And even if they had a plan, I don't know if there's money available to do anything about it. The Wabash River is nationally significant, and it should be the center of our conservation efforts in Indiana. We work on the Wabash River because it is our mission to conserve lands and waters on which all life depends and survives. Why does it matter? Conservation provides so many benefits to us as people. My daughter, and I've shared this story with Jingle, my daughter is very young, and she often asks me what I do. And one day she came home from school, and I said, what did you do today in school? And she normally doesn't tell me, but she said, we did habitat. I said, yeah? What is habitat? And she said, habitat is water to drink, food to eat, and it's a place to sleep. And she had it. That is habitat. We all need those things. All the things I showed you just need those things too. We have all that in common. When we conserve things, we're protecting our own habitat. We're protecting the things we need to drink, the things we need to eat, and the places we need to sleep, and the places that we need to hide. We have a goal, the Nature Conservancy does, of protecting a total of 100,000 acres by Indiana's bicentennial. The Nature Conservancy bought our first acre to protect in this state in 1960 in Montgomery County. And we believe that by Indiana's bicentennial, we will have protected 100,000 acres in this state for conservation. We also have a goal of restoring an additional 15,000 acres of floodplain along the Wabash River to restore that function that the floodplain should have naturally. These things don't happen automatically. These things happen because of people like you. You came tonight because you were interested in our rivers and streams. And so I hope you'll join the Nature Conservancy. I hope you'll help us to do this. If you don't, do something. Okay? Everybody can play a role in doing this. Some of the big news I have tonight is that the place in Indiana where we've never had an office is in Southwest Indiana. I'm the closest employee, and I'm 2 hours away. we think that we've almost raised enough money to open our first office in Evansville. And we plan to do that next year. And so we will, for the first time, have a presence in Southwest Indiana.
We think it should be here by the Wabash.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea, man. It's a great idea. So I want to thank these organizations and agencies for helping us. They help us a lot with our Wabash River work. And so we're very appreciative to them.